At the end of the video, we're going to use the brush we created using Blender only on a mesh. So you want to make sure you have enough geometry. This one has 4 million faces, and that should be enough. One more thing, you want to make sure you have Node Wrangler on. So Preferences, Add-on. If you don't know Node Wrangler, you should be ashamed of yourself. It's right here. Make sure it's on. Shift A, and I'm gonna add a plane, rotate it on the X 90 degrees. Press 1 for orthographic view. And I'm gonna start by adding a new material. And press A and the dot on the numpad to find where it is. Change it to material preview so we can see the texture. Delete the principal BSDF. Shift A, add a wave texture. Click in at Control T to add the coordinate. Plug it in here. Shift A, add a color ramp. Change it to cardinal. And now we're gonna start to do some changes using the object coordinate. Change it to y-axis and try to follow along. 0.8 scale, -10 distortion, detail 4.6, detail scale 0.5, detail roughness 0.58, and offset 4.7. This is the settings that I have, and I'm gonna move this flag down here and change the black value to 0.06 and change the sign to triangle wave. Now I'm gonna duplicate this and I'm gonna add another one. This is for another wrinkle. So let's see how it is. So you want to do some changes here. I'm gonna change the scale to -7.5, distortion -16.5, detail leave it like that, and this roughness 0.5 and 5 on the offset. Now the scale should be -0.75. That's it. And same here, about the same color ramp. Now you want to mix those together, so Shift A, add a mix, change the mix to color, this one at B, this one at A, Control Shift to see what's going on, and change the mix to darken, so you only get dark values all the way up. Very good. Now we're gonna add another wave texture, but this time it would be Control Shift the color ramp would be vertical. So change it to X. I'm gonna change a little bit the offset here, so -0.4 on the Z location, and degrees here, rotation, I'm gonna leave it like that. Scale 1, distortion -15, detail like that, scale 0.55, roughness 0.6, and offset 5.9. Now I'm gonna change the dark value to 0.03 and move the white flag about here. Now if we want to see how they look together, we need to duplicate this one, Shift D, move it to B, and this one to A. And the factor, I'm gonna move it down to 0.6. Okay, 0.6. So we have 2 horizontal, 1 vertical. Duplicating this, we're gonna reset the mapping here. So pressing the mapping and backspace, so it's resetting the mapping. Control Shift on the color so we see what's happening here. and we're gonna leave it on X here and change the distortion to -5, detail scale 2.2, detail roughness 0.38, offset 7.7, and this would be, I'm gonna leave it like that, maybe move the flag, the white flag, a little bit here, and adding another mix. So duplicating this, Shift D, factor 0.62. This is what we have so far. Now we're gonna add another horizontal one, so clicking these and Shift D to duplicate them, Control Shift on the color ramp and change it to Y, and try to change the settings here to -1, -12 distortion, 4.6 detail, 0.5 scale, 0.53 for the roughness, and 1.8 for the offset. And I'm gonna change here the cardinal to ease. And now we're gonna add another, duplicate this, add another mix and see what we have so far. So it looks pretty good. I'm gonna change the factor to 0.86, and that looks pretty good. And last one, we're gonna add another vertical one, so duplicating this again, changing to X right there, change the value to location Z 0.4 meter, and the rotation 0.7, and we're going to change here the scale to 0.9, 12, -12.5 distortion, and 0.5 here, 0.56 for the roughness, and 8 for the offset. This is what we have. Control Shift clicking on this, and we're gonna leave it like that, and of course add another mix. So duplicate this, Shift D here, I'm gonna leave it at 0.82 mix. Now I want to organize this mess a little bit, so we're gonna group those together. So I'm gonna choose those, Control G to group those, and hit Tab. I'm gonna rename this horizontal 1. So we got this guy. Same here, Control G, Tab, call it horizontal 2. This is nicer already. And this would be Control G, Tab, vertical 1. And this, Control G, Tab, vertical 2. Control G, Tab. This is horizontal 3. Control G, Tab, vertical 3. Now I'm just gonna organize this a little bit. I suggest you do as well. So we got these. We can go Control J, and then we got the frame. And here under node we can add a color. Let's just something like that, and hit F2, and we call it wrinkles. Is that how you spell it? I don't know. Wrinkles. Now we're gonna add a noise to the whole thing, so Shift A, add noise texture, Control Shift click it, and Control T, so we have the coordinates, and we're gonna add a color ramp, and maybe we can already put those together in a frame. So Control J, change the colors to something else, maybe green, F2, call it noise. And now change some of the settings, change it to object here, and the Y I'm gonna put it at -13. Change here the scale 1.2, 4.1, and that's it. I'm gonna change it to 2D, and scale would be 1, detail 0.2, roughness 0.5, and distortion 0. Color ramp would be B-spline, and I'm gonna move the dark flag up here, change the white to 0.7 value. So this is going to change all overall like bump of the whole thing. So if you have this and you want to mix it together, so we're gonna add Shift A, mix, same thing, change it to color, change it to darken, plug that back in here, whoa, back here, Control Shift, so we see, add this one here. So what this does, it's just adding darker values overall, and it mixes it together nicely. So the factor I'm going to leave at 0.68. One last thing we want to add for this material to work properly as a brush is a round gradient that will help mixing the brush strokes. So we're gonna Shift A, add gradient texture, move this here, Control Shift click the gradient so we see what we have. Control T to get the texture coordinates and the mapping, change it to object, and change the gradient to spherical. Again, we want to add a color ramp, and we're gonna change color ramp, gonna leave it at linear and move the white flag down here. Add another mix, actually duplicate this, Shift D, but we're gonna move it to the B socket and the A socket as well, and we're gonna change it to multiply and all the way up. So now you can tell the difference between not having any factor and all the way up. It makes it a little bit more gradual, and we want to mix those together, this and that, by adding another duplicate of this. So Shift D, move this to B, keep it on multiply and mix those together, and that's it pretty much. Now just to get a little bit more organized, we're gonna group those, like not group, it's Control J, frame those, and change the color to anything else, and you can rename it sphere if you like. So now everything is ready. Next thing, we're gonna bake this. For baking, we're gonna use an image texture. So Shift A, add an image texture, hit new, call it stamp, lips, skin, and I'm gonna double this. Okay, keep it like this, make sure it's clicked so you get this highlight, and same as the object, go to render, change the render samples to 1 and all the way down to bake, and click bake. Okay, after this is done, you have your image baked, so it's ready, and you definitely want to save this. So click image, save as, save it anywhere you save stuff, Okay, so we don't need this anymore. We can hide it pressing H. Join the areas. And make sure you have your object in front of you. And go to solid view, Control Tab, sculpt mode. And now, if you click here, you see there's only one brush here for we're gonna use the sculpt draw. And clicking here, we're gonna duplicate this. And we're gonna call this lips skin stamp. And going down to texture, hit new, call it lips skin stamp, very original. Change it to area plane, go down to stroke, change it to anchored. And now you can go down to texture properties. You're gonna click open and load the texture that you saved. After loading your texture, you can start using it. So we're gonna do this. I'm gonna disable the X symmetry because I want it to be not symmetrical. And I'm gonna change the strength to 0.25 and a little bit bigger size for the brush, and gonna click and drag it up. Or maybe to the side. Click and drag it. And I'm gonna use every time, I'm gonna change the angle a little bit.